An unexpected friendship. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about Sophia. It wasn't because she was beautiful. Although she certainly was. It wasn't because she was talented. Though her sketches had been remarkable. It was because she had made him feel something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. The following Saturday morning, Daniel found himself walking toward Morning Promise Cafe once again. He smiled to himself. "I'm only going because the coffee is good," he whispered. Deep inside, he knew that wasn't the real reason. As he opened the cafe door, the familiar scent of fresh coffee and cinnamon welcomed him. Soft jazz music floated through the room. He looked around. No Sophia. Trying not to feel disappointed, he ordered his usual caramel latte and sat near the same window. Nearly 20 minutes passed. He opened his laptop and tried to answer work emails. Then the cafe door opened. A cool breeze swept inside. Daniel looked up. Sophia. She was wearing a light gray sweater, blue jeans, and a dark green scarf. Her sketchbook was tucked under one arm, and tiny raindrops still shimmered in her hair. The moment she saw Daniel, her face brightened. "Daniel?" He stood and smiled. "Hi, Sophia. I didn't expect to see you here. I guess we both have good taste in coffee." She laughed. "I guess we do." The barista noticed them smiling at each other. "The usual table is free," he said with a grin. Sophia looked at Daniel. "Would you like to join me?" "I'd love to." They settled into the same seats as the week before. It felt strangely familiar. As if no time had passed at all. For the next 2 hours, they talked about everything. Daniel learned that Sophia worked as a freelance illustrator. She designed book covers, painted murals, and occasionally taught art classes to children. "What made you become an artist?" Daniel asked. Sophia looked out the rain-covered window. "When I was little, my grandmother used to tell me that every face hides a story." Daniel listened carefully. "So I started drawing people. Trying to discover their stories." She smiled. "Exactly. What about you?" Daniel thought for a moment. "I became a software engineer because I loved solving problems." "And do you still love it?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated. "I think so." Sophia noticed the uncertainty in his voice. "That's not a very confident answer." Daniel laughed softly. "Maybe I've been working too much. Maybe." She gently closed her sketchbook. "Sometimes we become so busy building a career that we forget to build a life." The sentence stayed with Daniel. Because deep down, he knew she was right. As the afternoon passed, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. Sophia glanced outside. "Want to take a walk?" Daniel smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask." They wandered through Seattle's quiet streets. Flower shops displayed colorful bouquets. Street musicians performed cheerful melodies. The fresh scent of rain lingered in the air. Eventually they reached a small waterfront park overlooking the bay. The water shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. Sophia opened her sketchbook. "Stay still." Daniel laughed. "What?" "I'm drawing you. I've never been someone's model before." "Don't worry." She smiled mischievously. "I'll make you look better." Daniel pretended to be offended. "So you're saying I need improvement?" "A little." They both laughed. For several minutes, Sophia quietly sketched while Daniel watched the boats crossing the water. Finally she turned the notebook toward him. The drawing was incredible. It captured not only his appearance, but also the thoughtful expression on his face. "I don't even recognize myself," Daniel whispered. Sophia smiled. "I do." As evening approached, they returned to the cafe. Before leaving, Sophia reached into her notebook and tore out a small page. She handed it to Daniel. On it she had written another promise. Some people enter your life quietly, but leave permanent footprints on your heart. Daniel looked at the words for several seconds. They're beautiful. Sophia shrugged modestly. They're just thoughts. No. Daniel folded the paper carefully and placed it inside his wallet. They're worth keeping. For the first time, Sophia blushed. A soft pink color appeared across her cheeks. Neither of them noticed the cafe owner smiling from behind the counter. Some friendships begin loudly. Others begin with shared coffee, gentle rain, and quiet conversations. Outside, the Seattle sky slowly turned golden as the sun set over the waterfront. Neither Daniel nor Sophia realized it yet. But the promise written on that small piece of paper was already beginning to come true. Because two strangers had become friends. And somewhere beneath those growing smiles, something much deeper had quietly begun. Growing feelings. Spring slowly arrived in Seattle. The gray skies began to clear more often, cherry blossoms bloomed along the streets, and the waterfront came alive with color. The city felt brighter, warmer, and somehow more hopeful. For Daniel and Sophia, life had settled into a beautiful rhythm. Every Saturday morning, they met at Morning Promise Cafe. Sometimes they spent hours talking over coffee. Sometimes they wandered through bookstores. Sometimes they simply walked along the waterfront without saying much at all. And somehow, those quiet moments became the most meaningful. One Saturday, Daniel arrived at the cafe carrying a small paper bag. Sophia noticed it immediately. "What are you hiding?" Daniel smiled. "It's a surprise. I like surprises." He placed the bag on the table. Sophia carefully opened it. Inside was a brand new leather-bound sketchbook. Its cover was engraved with a simple sentence in silver letters. "Every great story begins with one sketch." Sophia's eyes widened. She gently ran her fingers across the cover. "It's beautiful." Daniel looked slightly nervous. "I remembered you saying your old sketchbook was almost full." Sophia looked at him with a warm smile. "You remembered that?" "Of course." She closed the sketchbook and looked down for a moment. When she looked back up, her eyes were shining. "No one has ever given me a gift this thoughtful." Daniel smiled. "I'm glad you like it." Instead of answering with words, Sophia reached across the table and squeezed his hand for a brief moment. It lasted only a few seconds. But to Daniel, it felt unforgettable. A week later, Sophia invited Daniel to her small art studio. The room overlooked Elliott Bay. Sunlight poured through large windows. Paintings covered the walls. Sketches rested on wooden tables. Half-finished canvases stood on easels. The studio felt alive. Creative. Personal. Daniel slowly walked around the room, admiring each piece. Eve. Nearby visitors smiled as they watched the happy pair teasing each other. The exhibition opened on a sunny Friday evening. The gallery filled quickly. Guests admired Sophia's artwork. Collectors asked questions. Several paintings sold within the first hour. Daniel stood quietly near the entrance, watching everything unfold. He wasn't paying attention to the paintings. He was watching Sophia. The way she smiled while speaking with visitors. The passion in her voice. The confidence she carried. He felt incredibly proud. Not because of her success alone. But because she was doing exactly what she loved. Marcus had once told Daniel. The right person makes you want to celebrate their dreams as much as your own. Standing in that gallery, Daniel finally understood those words. Later that night, after the exhibition ended, Sophia and Daniel walked toward the waterfront. The city lights reflected across the calm water. A cool breeze drifted through the air. Sophia leaned against the railing. I've been thinking. Daniel looked at her. About what? She smiled softly. Do you believe people meet for a reason? Daniel thought carefully before answering. I didn't used to. And now? He looked at her. Now I'm not so sure. Sophia laughed quietly. I used to think life was all about planning. And now? She looked out at the water. Now I think some of the best things happen when you least expect them. Daniel nodded. I agree. The first date. The days following Sophia's art exhibition felt different. Not because anything obvious had changed. They still met every Saturday morning. They still laughed over coffee. They still walked along the Seattle waterfront. But now, every glance lasted a little longer. Every smile carried a little more meaning. Every goodbye became a little harder. Neither Daniel nor Sophia wanted to admit it. But friendship was quietly becoming something more. One Monday afternoon, Daniel sat in his office, staring at his computer screen. Lines of code filled the monitor. Yet he hadn't written a single new line in almost 20 minutes. His thoughts kept drifting back to Sophia. His coworker, Ryan, walked past his desk and stopped. You've been smiling at your screen for 5 minutes. Daniel looked up. I have. Ryan laughed. Either you solved the world's biggest software problem. He leaned closer. Or there's someone special. Daniel smiled sheepishly. There might be. Ryan folded his arms. So what are you waiting for? Daniel hesitated. What if she doesn't feel the same? Ryan shrugged. You'll never know unless you ask. The advice stayed with Daniel for the rest of the day. That evening, he picked up his phone. He typed a message. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, he took a deep breath and pressed send. Sophia, would you like to have dinner with me this Saturday? Not just as friends, but as a real date. For a few moments, there was no reply. Daniel's heart pounded. Then his phone vibrated. Sophia's message appeared. I was beginning to wonder if you'd ever ask. Daniel laughed out loud. A second message arrived. Yes. I'd love to. Saturday evening arrived. Seattle's skyline glowed beneath a spectacular sunset. Daniel waited outside a small Italian restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. He adjusted his jacket for what felt like the 100th time. Then he saw her. Sophia walked toward. For a brief moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Daniel offered his arm. Shall we? Sophia slipped her hand through his arm. I'd love to. Dinner was warm, relaxed, and filled with laughter. They talked about childhood memories. Favorite books. Travel dreams. Family traditions. At one point, Sophia asked quietly. What's one dream you've never told anyone? Daniel thought for a long moment. I've always wanted to build something that people remember. Sophia tilted her head. A building? He shook his head. A life. Her smile softened. I think you're already building one. The word stayed with him. Because somehow, she always knew exactly what to say. After dinner, they walked toward the waterfront. The evening air was cool. The lights of the city reflected across the calm water. Street musicians played soft acoustic music nearby. Daniel and Sophia stopped beside the railing. Neither seemed eager to leave. Sophia looked out at the bay. This has been my favorite evening in a very long time. Daniel smiled. Mine too. A gentle silence settled between them. Not awkward. Not uncomfortable. Just peaceful. Sophia turned toward him. So. She laughed. You're copying me again. I learn from the best. She smiled warmly. For a long moment, they simply stood there, looking into each other's eyes. The sounds of the city faded into the background. The world seemed quieter. Smaller. As if only the two of them existed. Daniel slowly reached for her hand. Sophia didn't pull away. Instead, she gently intertwined her fingers with his. Her heart raced. So did his. Daniel spoke softly. "I'm really glad I walked into that cafe." Sophia smiled. "So am I." Then, almost without thinking, she stepped a little closer. Close enough to hear his heartbeat. Close enough to see every tiny detail in his eyes. Daniel leaned in slowly. Giving her every chance to step back. She didn't. Instead, she closed tea. Their smile said enough. As they continued walking, Sophia reached into her purse. She handed Daniel a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully. Inside, written in her familiar handwriting, were the words. "The greatest promises are not spoken aloud. They are quietly kept by two hearts that choose each other every single day." Daniel looked up. "I think this is my favorite one." Sophia smiled. "It's mine too." He carefully placed the note inside his wallet with all the others. Then he looked at her. "You know." "What?" "I think I've collected enough promises." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Oh." Daniel smiled. "Now I'd like to spend my life helping you keep them." Sophia laughed softly, her eyes shining beneath the city lights. "I'd like that." Hand in hand, they continued walking along the waterfront. Behind them, Seattle sparkled beneath the night sky. Ahead of them lay an unknown future. Neither knew what challenges awaited. Neither knew how much their love would be tested. But one thing had become certain. The story that began with a rainy morning and a cup of coffee had become something far more beautiful. It had become the beginning of love. To be continued. The unexpected challenge. For the next several months, life felt almost perfect. Daniel and Sophia settled into a rhythm that made every ordinary day feel extraordinary. Saturday morning still belonged to Morning Promise Cafe. Sunday afternoons were reserved for long walks through the city's parks or along the waterfront. On busy weekdays, they met for dinner whenever their schedules allowed. And on the nights they couldn't meet, they stayed on the phone until one of them fell asleep. For Daniel, life no longer revolved around deadlines and software updates. For Sophia, every new painting seemed brighter than the last. Love had quietly transformed both of them. One sunny afternoon, Daniel surprised Sophia by taking her to a hill overlooking the Seattle skyline. The city stretched before them like a painting. The Space Needle stood proudly in the distance. Sophia leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder. "This is beautiful." Daniel smiled. "It reminds me of one of your paintings." Sophia laughed. "Everything reminds you of my paintings. That's because they're unforgettable." She looked up at him. "And what about us?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "We're unforgettable too." Sophia smiled. For a moment, the future seemed limitless. 3 days later, everything changed. Daniel was called into an unexpected meeting at work. His company had secured a major international contract. It was the largest project in the company's history. The CEO personally congratulated Daniel. "We want you to lead the project." Daniel was stunned. "This is an incredible opportunity." "It is." The CEO nodded. "But there's one condition." Daniel's smile faded. "The project is based in Singapore." The room suddenly felt very quiet. "We'll need you there for at least 1 year." 1 year. The words echoed inside Daniel's mind. He had dreamed of leading an international project. Now the dream stood before him. But so did an impossible decision. The promotion. The project. Singapore. 1 year. Sophia remained silent. She stirred her coffee without looking up. Finally, she whispered. When would you leave? In 6 weeks. She nodded slowly. Neither of them knew what to say. The cafe, once filled with warmth and laughter, suddenly felt painfully quiet. Over the following days, they tried to act as though nothing had changed. They still met. They still laughed. But beneath every smile hid the same unanswered question. What happens now? One evening, they walked along the waterfront. Sophia stopped beside the railing. Do you remember the promise I wrote the day we met? Daniel smiled. Never stop believing in unexpected beginnings. She nodded. I never imagined that unexpected beginnings could lead to unexpected goodbyes. Daniel took her hands. This isn't goodbye. It feels like one. He looked directly into her eyes. I don't want to lose you. Sophia's voice trembled. I don't want to lose you either. For several moments, neither spoke. The waves gently touched the shore below. A ferry passed quietly across the bay. The world continued moving. Even though there seemed to stand still. A week later, Sophia received unexpected news of her own. An art gallery in Paris had selected her work for an international exhibition. It was every artist's dream. Her paintings would be displayed alongside some of the world's finest contemporary artists. She should have been thrilled. Instead, she sat quietly in her studio, staring at the invitation. When Daniel arrived that evening, she handed him the letter. He read it carefully. Then looked up with a smile. Sophia. She sighed. I know. This is incredible. It is. But. She finished his sentence. It starts the same month you leave. Daniel slowly nodded. Now both of them faced once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Both dreams required sacrifice. Both dreams demanded distance. Neither wanted to ask the other to choose. The following Saturday, they returned to their favorite table in Morning Promise Cafe. The owner greeted them warmly. The usual. Daniel smiled. Always. As they sat together, Sophia removed a small folded note from her sketchbook. She placed it in front of Daniel. He unfolded it. It read. Sometimes love is not tested by how tightly we hold on, but by how bravely we support each other's dreams. Daniel looked at the words for a long time. Then he carefully folded the note and placed it inside his wallet beside all the others. He reached across the table and gently held Sophia's hand. No matter what happens. She squeezed his hand. We'll face it together. Outside, the Seattle rain began to fall once more. Just like it had on the day they first met. The rain wasn't a sign of sadness. It was a reminder. Some of life's most beautiful stories begin in storms. And sometimes. They grow stronger because of them. To be continued. Long distance promise. 6 weeks disappeared faster than either Daniel or Sophia expected. Every morning felt more precious. Every sunset seemed more beautiful. Every goodbye after dinner lasted a little longer. Neither wanted to waste a single moment. They visited every place that had become part of their story. Morning Promise Cafe. The waterfront. The old bookstore. The hill overlooking Seattle. Sophia's art studio. Each place held a memory. Each memory felt priceless. The night before Daniel's flight, they walked through Pike Place Market after most of the crowds had gone home. The streets were quiet. The lights from nearby cafes reflected on the wet pavement after a light rain. Sophia slipped her hand into Daniel's. I wish time would slow down. Daniel smiled sadly. So do I. They stopped beside a small flower stand that was closing for the night. An elderly florist smiled at them. You two look like you're saying goodbye. Daniel nodded. For a while. The florist handed Sophia a single white lily. Then don't think of it as goodbye. He smiled warmly. Think of it as a promise to meet again. Neither Daniel nor Sophia forgot those words. The next morning, Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was filled with travelers. Announcements echoed through the terminal. Suitcases rolled across polished floors. People hurried in every direction. Daniel and Sophia stood quietly near the departure gate. Neither knew how to begin the conversation. Finally Sophia reached into her bag. She removed a small leather notebook. I made this for you. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of handwritten promises. One for every week he would be away. The first page read. Week 1, remember that somewhere across the ocean, someone is cheering for you every single day. The second page read. Week 2, success means little if you forget the people who believed in you before anyone else did. Every page carried a new promise. Every page carried a piece of Sophia's heart. Daniel looked at her, speechless. This is the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me. Sophia smiled through tears. I wanted you to have something that reminds you you're never alone. Daniel gently closed the notebook. I'll read one page every Sunday. It's a deal. The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Time had run out. Daniel stepped closer. So. Sophia laughed softly through her tears. You still copy me. Only because I like the original. She smiled. Then wrapped her arms around him. The embrace lasted a long time. Long enough for the rest of the world to disappear. When they finally stepped apart, Daniel kissed her forehead gently. I love you. Sophia looked into his eyes. I love you too. The words felt stronger than ever before. Not because they were being said for the first time. Because they were being tested. Daniel picked up his suitcase. He took one last look at Sophia. Then walked toward the gate. Halfway there, he turned around. She was still standing exactly where he had left her. Smiling through tears. Holding on to hope. He smiled back. Then disappeared beyond the security doors. 3 weeks later. Singapore was unlike anything Daniel had imagined. Towering skyscrapers. Gardens filled with tropical flowers. Bustling streets alive with people from around the world. His work was exciting. The project challenged him every day. Yet every evening, he found himself sitting on the balcony of his apartment with Sophia's notebook in his hands. Each Sunday, he opened a new page. Each promise made him feel closer to home. Meanwhile, Sophia arrived in Paris. The city welcomed her with narrow streets, historic buildings, and art galleries that seemed to exist on every corner. Her exhibition attracted visitors from across Europe. Critics praised her paintings. Collectors purchased several pieces. Her dream was becoming reality. But every night, after returning to her hotel, she instinctively reached for her phone. Daniel always answered. Sometimes they talked for hours. Sometimes they simply stayed connected in silence. Listening to each other's breathing. Watching each other through a screen. Making thousands of miles feel just a little shorter. One evening, Daniel received a package from Seattle. Inside was a framed sketch. It showed 2 empty coffee cups sitting beside a rainy cafe window. On the back, Sophia had written. No matter how far apart we are, there will always be 2 cups waiting for us at Morning Promise Cafe. Daniel smiled. He hung the sketch on the wall opposite his bed. Every morning, it reminded him why he was working so hard. Not just for his career. For their future. Months passed. Birthdays were celebrated through video calls. Anniversaries were spent watching the same movie while sitting in different countries. Holiday dinners happened across different time zones. It wasn't easy. There were lonely nights. Missed hugs. Moments when both wished they could simply reach through the screen. But neither gave up. Because every difficult day strengthened the promise they had made. One rainy evening in Paris, Sophia stood beside the Seine River. At the exact same time, Daniel stood beside Marina Bay in Singapore. They were thousands of miles apart. Yet both looked up at the night sky. And both whispered the same words. One day. Because they believed that one day, the distance would end. One day, the airport goodbyes would become airport reunions. One day, 2 cups of coffee would once again sit on the same table. And one day, the promises they had written separately would become promises they would keep together. The future remained uncertain. But one thing was. The surprise reunion. 9 months. That was how long Daniel and Sophia had lived on opposite sides of the world. 9 months of video calls. 9 months of handwritten promises. 9 months of counting days instead of living them. Yet through every challenge, they had never stopped believing in each other. Every Sunday, Daniel opened another page of Sophia's notebook. Every Friday, Sophia received a handwritten letter from Daniel. Technology kept them connected. But it was the effort they made for one another that kept their love alive. One Thursday evening in Singapore, Daniel received unexpected news. The international project had finished ahead of schedule. His company was thrilled. His manager smiled as he entered the conference room. "You've done an outstanding job." Daniel thanked him. Then came the surprise. "You've earned 2 weeks of paid leave." Daniel blinked. "Starting tomorrow." His first thought wasn't about rest. It wasn't about sightseeing. It wasn't even about Seattle. It was Sophia. Without wasting a second, he opened his laptop and searched for flights. Paris. The earliest flight departed that very night. He booked it immediately. Meanwhile, Sophia spent her afternoon preparing for the closing day of her exhibition. The gallery buzzed with visitors. Journalists asked questions. Collectors admired her newest paintings. Everything she had dreamed about was finally happening. Yet despite the success, she felt a quiet emptiness. She wished Daniel could be there. She wanted him to see everything with his own eyes. Instead, she planned to call him after the exhibition ended. Little did she know. He was already on his way. "I stopped counting the days after month 6. Daniel looked surprised. "Really?" She nodded. "I realized something." "What?" "I wasn't waiting for a date anymore." She looked into his eyes. "I was waiting for you." Daniel smiled. "I think that's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Before leaving the hill, Daniel reached into his backpack. "I brought you something." Sophia laughed. "You always bring surprises." He handed her a carefully wrapped package. Inside was the framed sketch of the 2 coffee cups. The same one she had mailed to him months earlier. But now, beneath her original drawing, Daniel had added a sentence in elegant handwriting. "Reserved for us, until we never have to sit apart again." Sophia stared at the words. Then looked at him. "You kept it. Every single day." She smiled through tears. "And now it belongs to both of us." Daniel nodded. "Just like every promise we've ever made." Sophia gently rested her head on his shoulder. The lights of Paris sparkled around them. Far away, Seattle waited. Their future remained uncertain. Daniel would soon return to Singapore. Sophia still had work in Paris. Another goodbye was coming. But something had changed. They no longer feared the distance. Because this reunion had reminded them of a simple truth. No matter how many miles separated them, love always found its way back. And somewhere beneath the glowing Paris sky, 2 hearts quietly made another promise. The next reunion would last forever. To be continued. Choosing forever. The week Daniel spent in Paris passed faster than either of them wanted. Every morning felt like a gift. Every afternoon became a new memory. Every evening ended with the same wish. Asterisk, if only time would slow down. Asterisk. They explored the city together. They wandered through quiet streets before sunrise. They shared breakfast in small cafes hidden between old stone buildings. They visited museums where Sophia admired the paintings while Daniel admired the way she looked at them. At night, they sat beside the Seine River, watching lights dance across the water. For one beautiful week, the distance disappeared. Life felt normal again. It felt like home. On Daniel's final evening in Paris, they returned to the bridge where street musicians played every sunset. A young violinist filled the evening air with a gentle melody. Sophia rested her head against Daniel's shoulder. "I wish we didn't have to leave." Daniel sighed. "So do I." She looked up at him. "How much longer?" He thought for a moment. "My contract ends in 3 months. And my exhibition tour finishes around the same time." Sophia smiled faintly. 3 months. Daniel nodded. "It sounds much shorter than 9. They both laughed softly. The next morning came far too soon. Daniel stood once again at an airport. Suitcase beside him. Passport in hand. Sophia stood quietly in front of him. Unlike their first goodbye in Seattle, neither of them cried immediately. Because this time, something felt different. Hope had replaced fear. Sophia smiled. "I'll see you in 3 months." Daniel gently held her hands. "No." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" He smiled. "You'll see me forever." Before Sophia could ask another question, the boarding announcement interrupted them. Daniel kissed her forehead. "I promise." Then he walked toward the gate. Sophia watched him disappear into the crowd. His final words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, "You'll see me." Meanwhile, Sophia's final exhibition in Paris ended with standing applause. Every painting had been sold. Art magazines praised her work. Several galleries invited her back for future exhibitions. Her career had reached heights she had once only dreamed about. That evening, she packed her brushes carefully into a wooden case. A small envelope slipped from between the pages of her sketchbook. It was the very first promise she had ever written. Asterisk, "Never stop believing in unexpected beginnings." Asterisk. She smiled. Then whispered softly. "I never did." 2 weeks later. Seattle welcomed them both home. The city looked exactly the way they remembered. The familiar streets. The waterfront. The smell of rain. The little flower shop. The old bookstore. Everything seemed unchanged. Except them. They had changed. Distance had made them stronger. More patient. More grateful. More certain. On a cool Saturday morning, Daniel sent Sophia a simple message. "Meet me at Morning Promise Cafe. Same table. 10 a.m. Sophia smiled the moment she read it. Some traditions should never change. At exactly 10 o'clock, she opened the cafe door. The warm aroma of coffee filled the room. Soft jazz music played in the background. Daniel was already sitting at their favorite table. Just like the first day they met. Only this time, something was different. A small wooden box rested on the table beside his coffee. Sophia sat down. She smiled. "You've been planning something." Daniel laughed. "You know me too well." The barista quietly placed 2 caramel lattes on the table. "The usual." Daniel thanked him. Then gently pushed the wooden box toward Sophia. "Open it." She carefully lifted the lid. Inside was every promise she had ever written. Each one had been carefully preserved. Perfectly folded. Perfectly protected. Beneath them rested one final card. Different from the others. She unfolded it slowly. Written in Daniel's handwriting were the words. My final promise, I never want another goodbye to be longer than a single workday. Sophia looked up. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Daniel reached across the table. I'm home. She whispered. I know. He smiled. And I plan to stay. For several seconds, neither spoke. They simply held each other's hands. The cafe around them buzzed with quiet conversation. Rain gently tapped against the windows. Everything felt wonderfully familiar. Sophia smiled through tears. So. Daniel laughed. So. She shook her head. You still copy me. I always will. They laughed together. Because some things were never meant to change. Outside, Seattle's rain continued falling softly. Just as it had on the day two strangers first met over coffee. Only now, they were no longer strangers. They were two people who had crossed oceans. Survived distance. Protected each other's dreams. And finally found their way back to the same table. The future stretched before them. Full of possibilities. Full of hope. And for the first time in a very long while. It belonged to both of them. To be continued. One last surprise. Seattle had always been known for its rain. But this particular spring felt different. The rain no longer reminded Daniel and Sophia of goodbyes. Instead, it reminded them of beginnings. Every Saturday morning, they still visited Morning Promise Cafe. The owner had started calling them our lucky couple. The corner table by the window had almost become unofficially theirs. The barista already knew their order before they spoke. 2 caramel lattes. 1 cinnamon roll. And 2 hours of conversation. Life had become beautifully ordinary. After everything they had survived, ordinary felt extraordinary. One afternoon, Sophia returned to her art studio after teaching a children's painting class. She found Daniel standing in the middle of the room. He was studying one of her newest paintings. She smiled. You're early. Daniel turned around. I wanted to see you. Sophia walked over and hugged him. What are you thinking about? Daniel looked around the studio. Do you remember the first drawing you ever made of me? Sophia laughed. The guy sitting awkwardly with a coffee cup. That's the one. It's still here. She pointed toward a framed sketch hanging near the window. Daniel walked over and smiled. I looked nervous. You were. I was. They both laughed. Later that evening, Daniel asked if she would take one more walk with him. One more. Sophia teased. We've taken hundreds. I know. But this one is important. She raised an eyebrow. Now I'm curious. Daniel simply smiled. You'll see. They walked through the familiar streets of Seattle. Past the old bookstore. Past the flower shop. Past the waterfront. Eventually they reached the hill overlooking the city. The same hill where they had once talked about dreams. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and orange. Sophia admired the view. It's beautiful. Daniel looked at her. It is. She laughed. You're L. Because you're still my favorite view. Sophia blushed. Even after everything they had been through, he could still make her heart race. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. Sophia smiled. Another surprise? He nodded. But not the one you're expecting. He handed her a small envelope. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Morning Promise Cafe. Sophia looked confused. "What is this?" "Turn it over." She did. Written on the back were the words, "Meet me here tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. Trust me." She looked up. "That's it?" Daniel smiled mysteriously. "That's it." The next morning, Seattle woke beneath a light drizzle. Sophia arrived at Morning Promise Cafe exactly at 10. Something immediately felt different. The cafe looked unusually quiet. There were no regular customers. No laptops. No newspapers. Only soft piano music. The owner greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, Sophia. Where is everyone?" He smiled. "Waiting. Waiting." Before she could ask another question, the lights dimmed slightly. One by one, friends and family stepped out from different corners of the cafe. Her parents. Daniel's parents. The cafe owner. The barista. Her fellow artists. Daniel's co-workers. Even the elderly florist from Pike Place Market was there, holding another white lily. Sophia covered her mouth in surprise. Then Daniel appeared. He walked slowly toward her. Wearing a navy suit. Holding the same leather notebook she had given him before he left for Singapore. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. Daniel smiled. "I've carried this notebook across 3 countries." He gently held it up. "Every promise inside it changed my life." Sophia couldn't speak. Daniel opened the notebook to the very last blank page. "I realized something." He looked directly into her eyes. There was one promise missing. He handed her a pen. Sophia looked confused. "What promise?" Daniel smiled softly. "The one we write together." Then, in front of everyone, he slowly knelt on one knee. Gasps echoed throughout the cafe. Sophia's hands trembled. Daniel opened a small velvet ring box. Inside rested a brilliant diamond ring. His voice was calm. Steady. Filled with love. "Sophia Bennett." She was already crying. "The first promise you ever wrote said, never stop believing in unexpected beginnings." She nodded through tears. "You were right." He smiled. "The most beautiful beginning of my life started the moment I met you." The room became completely silent. Daniel continued. "You've been my greatest adventure. My safest place. My favorite conversation. My best friend. And the person I want to share every tomorrow with." He looked at the blank page in the notebook. Then back at Sophia. "So here's my question." He smiled. "Will you help me write every promise that comes after this?" Tears streamed down Sophia's face. She laughed softly through them. Then nodded. "Yes." Daniel smiled. She laughed again. "Yes." The entire cafe erupted into applause. Daniel gently placed the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Sophia immediately wrapped her arms around him. The hug lasted a long time. Just like every hug that had ever mattered. The cafe owner quietly wiped away a tear. The elderly florist smiled proudly. The barista whispered, "I knew this day would come." After everyone settled down, Sophia picked up the notebook. She opened it to the final page. Together, she and Daniel wrote one final promise. "No matter where life takes us, we promise to choose each other, every morning, every challenge, every dream, for the rest of our lives." They both signed their names. Daniel closed the notebook gently. "It finally feels complete." Sophia smiled. "No." She looked into his eyes. "It's finally beginning." Outside, the rain slowly stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. And somewhere. Happily ever after. 1 year later. Seattle welcomed another beautiful spring. Cherry blossoms lined the streets. Morning sunlight reflected across Elliott Bay. The familiar sound of light rain mixed with birds singing in the distance. For Daniel Brooks and Sophia Bennett, life had become everything they had once dreamed of. Not because life had become perfect, but because they had learned to face every imperfect moment together. The wedding took place on a quiet Saturday afternoon. Not inside a grand ballroom. Not inside a luxury hotel. Instead, they chose the place where their story had begun. Morning Promise Café. The owner happily closed the cafe for the day. Every chair was decorated with white flowers. Soft candles glowed on every table. The windows overlooked the rainy Seattle streets where two strangers had first met years earlier. Family and close friends filled the small cafe. The barista, smiling from ear to ear, prepared one last pair of caramel lattes before the ceremony began. "They're on the house," he joked. Everyone laughed. Daniel stood near the front of the cafe wearing a classic navy blue suit. He looked nervous. Ryan leaned over and whispered. "You've spoken in front of hundreds of people at work." Daniel smiled. "I know. So why are you shaking?" Daniel looked toward the entrance. "Because this speech is the most important one I'll ever give." Ryan laughed softly. "Fair enough." The cafe doors opened. Every conversation stopped. Sophia entered slowly, wearing a simple white wedding dress. She carried a bouquet of white lilies, the same flower the elderly florist had given her on the day Daniel left for Singapore. Sunlight filtered gently through the cafe windows, surrounding her in a warm golden glow. Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her. She smiled through happy tears. And in that moment, every mile they had traveled. Every airport goodbye. Every late-night phone call. Every. As Sophia reached the front of the cafe, Daniel quietly whispered. "You look beautiful." Sophia smiled. "You've told me that before." "I know. But today it's even more true." They both laughed softly. The officiant welcomed everyone. Then invited the couple to exchange their vows. Daniel unfolded a small piece of paper. Then smiled. "I was going to read something I prepared." He folded it again. "But I'd rather speak from my heart." Sophia squeezed his hand. Daniel looked into her eyes. "The first day I met you, I thought I was walking into a coffee shop." He smiled. "I had no idea I was walking into the rest of my life." Many guests quietly wiped away tears. Daniel continued. "You taught me that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. You taught me that love grows through patience. And you taught me that every promise becomes meaningful only when someone chooses to keep it." His voice trembled slightly. "I promise to choose you on the easy days. On the difficult days. On the ordinary mornings. And on every extraordinary adventure life gives us. I promise to love you for the rest of my life." Sophia wiped away a tear before beginning her own vows. "When I first saw you sitting by that cafe window." She laughed softly. "I thought you looked a little lonely." The guest smiled. "I wanted to draw your picture." She looked into Daniel's eyes. "I never imagined we would spend our lives painting one together." Her voice grew emotional. "You believed in my dreams before the world noticed them. You celebrated every success. You stood beside me during every fear. And you never once stopped keeping your promises." She smiled. "So today, I make one final promise. No matter where life takes us, I will always choose you." The officiant smiled warmly. "By the promises you have made and the love you have shared, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel and Sophia Smee." One rainy morning, Nearly 5 years after they first met, Sophia placed a tiny leather notebook on the table. Daniel smiled immediately. "You bought another one?" Sophia nodded. "The old one is full." Daniel opened the new notebook. Every page was blank. Waiting. He looked at Sophia. "What should we write first?" She thought for a moment. Then slowly wrote. "Promise number 1, never stop creating new memories together." Daniel smiled. "I like that." He added another line beneath hers. "Promise number 2, always come back to this table, no matter how busy life becomes." Sophia laughed. "That's an easy promise to keep." They closed the notebook together. Outside, people hurried through the rain, umbrellas filling the sidewalks with color. Inside, time seemed to stand still. The cafe was still warm. The coffee still smelled the same. The jazz music still played softly. Only one thing had changed. Two strangers who once shared a table now shared a life. Years later, visitors to Morning Promise Cafe often noticed an old framed photograph hanging near the window. It showed a smiling couple sitting at a small wooden table, each holding a cup of coffee. Below the photograph was a handwritten quote. Asterisk, "The greatest love stories don't begin with perfect plans." Asterisk. Asterisk, "They begin with unexpected conversations, small promises, and two hearts willing to keep them." Asterisk. Many customers smiled as they read those words. Few knew the true story behind them. But Daniel and Sophia did. And every Saturday morning, when they returned to their favorite table, they smiled at each other with the same warmth they had shared on the very first day. Because some promises are never meant to end. They simply become the way two people choose to live.